So, hey everybody, my name's Josh Madakor. I'm a YouTuber slash the CourseCareers IT instructor, and I have Luigi here who went through the IT course and graduated kind of recently-ish, got a job and agreed to come on interview with us. So thank you so much for coming on here.
Thanks a lot, Josh. I really appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Can you talk a little bit about like what you did before you started getting into like IT and course careers?
Yeah, so prior to this, I was a law enforcement officer. I did that for about 3 years and kind of everything before that, leading up to becoming a police officer. So before that, I was a civilian at the department I was at for about a year and a half. And then prior to that, I was in loss prevention. And then before that, I had just a couple other jobs. Went through college. I worked at the VA and then another place for insurance. So kind of diverse background, but definitely nothing particular to tech or IT in particular.
It sounds like you probably have a lot of interesting stories, like being an LP and like law enforcement also.
Oh yeah, way too many to count.
Make for a good YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
What made you think to like switch into IT?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say because, everything I did kind of leading up to being a police officer, I did for that, right? And I thought that was the end all be all. And then just, a lot of events that kind of led up to like, okay, is this sustainable for me, Because a lot of the things I want out of life to be there for my family, especially, for my wife, eventually we want to have kids and stuff like that. A lot of the things I was seeing being a police officer, it kind of just showed me like, okay, this is going to be very difficult and I don't foresee it being very sustainable. I mean, because there's a lot of things that it breaks you down, man, mentally, physically, emotionally. And, after last year, I kind of decided like, okay, I think this is it. Like I need to start thinking of a plan B. And so, yeah, so I've always been interested in tech. I grew up here in the Bay Area. My dad worked through the dot-com bubble. And so I guess like being like around him really kind of influenced my interest in technology, so, and then last year I came across a bunch of your stuff when I finally made that decision. So that was like around last year summer. So I came across his YouTube, started looking into cybersecurity and then like boot camps and stuff like that. And then finally, I kind of just decided, that's why I did WGU. So I started WGU back in December. And then prior to that, I was kind of pre-studying the A plus stuff. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at today. Came across CourseCareers and then, yeah, now I'm here.
Yeah, it's kind of a recurring theme I hear a bit about like their current, I'm going to say people's current job. It doesn't have like enough autonomy or has too much. It makes it hard to visit their family or essentially do what they want to do. Well, a lot of those jobs are really important. Like nursing is like another one I see a lot of people transitioning out of. IT does have a lot of autonomy and like you can, essentially be wherever you want to be. Sometimes like if you work remote, so that's understandable.
Yeah, definitely.
So like from the time you started CourseCareers to the time you finished it, do you remember about how long it took you to get through the course?
I want to say like 2 to 4 weeks. I think I finished the course in about like a week and a half, but I had like a small hiccup with like proctor service and like CourseCareers sending over the stuff. So I was kind of like in limbo while waiting to take the final.
Oh, gotcha.
But I kind of breezed through. Yeah, that's all good. But I kind of breezed through the material because a lot of the stuff you covered was in A plus. So like a lot of the hardware, obviously the troubleshooting, the networking stuff. And yeah, I mean, the labs, I made it go through the lab. Like once I got to the labs, like a lab every day. And then, while I was in that limbo phase, that's when I was like, okay, let me just redo the labs and then like do the other things in the GitHub and stuff like that.
I'm glad to hear you did the labs more than once. I think that's really useful, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, you give great advice. It's like, you can't just do it once and say like, oh, I know how to do it, right? It's like, you kind of want to build that intuition at least like 3 to 5 times to say like, okay, I feel pretty proficient at it. And let's say like 6 months from now, if I actually start using Active Directory, it's like, okay, I have some familiarity. Maybe if I just like played around with it either prior or playing around with it, like at that moment in time, it should pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, it helps a lot, and it gives you something to talk about too. Like if you've done something for an extreme example like 100 times, it's really easy to talk about it if you have like an interview or I guess it's a cocktail party too.
Yeah, definitely. I think now that you mentioned it, it did help me in my interview process because some of the questions I was asked, I didn't get asked too many technical questions, but I did get asked some. So it was like mainly around troubleshooting. And then so, coming off of A plus and Network plus, I kind of used like CompTIA troubleshooting methodology as well as using like a lab. So I used kind of like, I used the DNS domain controller and client lab that we did in CourseCareers. I kind of explained that. It's like, okay, so establish connectivity to the domain controller and this is why I did the steps I took. And then, yeah, actually, it worked in my benefit because how I explained it, the interview was actually quite impressed with how I gave it answered.
That's funny.
Yeah, because I told him like use like command line tools like ping, NSLOOK, stuff like that, IP config, and then he was like, "Oh wow!" Like so, he's like, "Yeah, I'll skip over these. It sounds like you know what you're talking about, actually." So,
That's funny.
yeah.
That's good to hear. How many interviews did you have to go through? Did you have like many in the same company, or like just more than one for more than one company, or how was that?
Yeah, so for the particular company that I got hired on, it was actually 4 interviews. Yeah, it's quite a lot. I mean, I always count the HR screen as an interview because, it is. And then I had one with a director and then a panel with like 3 different people, like a manager or 2 managers and a director. And then the last interview was kind of like, it was with like a vice president within the company. So it's
Oh,
like, it's pretty, yeah, pretty substantial interview process, a lot of vetting.
that's cool. You only had to go through that with one company, or did you have others?
Yeah, so I had a couple interviews. It was mainly just HR phone screens, but I definitely had some trouble like getting past like the HR phone screen
Oh, really?
because I don't know. Yeah, for example, I had one company reach out to me and I spoke with the recruiter and she's like, "Oh, I'm interested in your resume," and then I'll forward off to the hiring manager and go from there. Never heard anything back from that.
Uh,
I had one other one, and that one was kind of like, oh, she was like, oh, I'm interested in your resume. And then I actually got referred to that one too. But then at the time when I applied, they already had someone at like kind of like the final offer phase.
mhm.
And so the recruiter told me like point blank before the interview started, hey, like, I just want to let you know the one position that we are hiring for, there is someone that's in that final offer phase. So I'm just letting you know that there's a high chance that if this person does take it, that we won't be moving forward with you. So I was
Uh,
like, okay, that's cool. No worries. And then that was really it. And then I had my brother-in-law introduced me to a person that lives or actually has his own MSP
mhm.
kind of local to here. And I just met with him and it was more so kind of just like informal interview. Nothing really like too crazy. So I didn't really have too many like interviews, like formal interview processes with companies.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, four is a lot. I feel like, especially for your first job. It's like, usually like for those like big tech companies, you go through like 4 or 5 or something. So I'm kind of surprised you had like that many for like one company. So sorry, sorry about
Yeah.
that, I guess.
I think the course careers, like your interview section, really helped a lot. I think, because the last time I interviewed was probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And
Okay.
so it was nice to get like a refresher. And, I think a lot of people kind of don't realize that, yes, this is a very technical job in a sense, like that you're applying for, but a lot of it centers around like customer service. So a lot of the
Uh,
questions are going to be behavior based and
mm.
how you deal with customers and if you're in a situation where someone's angry. So I'm glad that you really covered that. And I think it really helped me as well.
Yeah, you probably have some like decent people skills having been in law enforcement as well. Probably those situations are more difficult than, dealing with, I guess, Bob down the hall in help desk, I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. It's funny. I see in Reddit all the time, or like just on the internet, people getting burnt out about help desk. And then I was like, yeah, I experienced burnout, so I think I could definitely handle like some guy who has a problem over the phone versus like someone who has like a mental crisis right in front of me. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, yeah. It's like you have that perspective already. So the help desk seems like not that bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely different because being a police officer, it's definitely more customer facing
Mm.
as well as loss prevention and stuff like that. It was definitely more customer facing, right? And then
Mm.
the situations are kind of evolving in like split seconds before your eyes. So it's like you have to make those decisions quick.
Yeah.
Whereas like this, it's like, okay, I have plenty of time to like ask all the questions and like kind of go deep down into like what's the problem and stuff like that. So it definitely helps for sure.
Cool. And then you don't have to talk about this part. I can like edit this out with magic, but do
Mhm.
you for in terms of like your salary and negotiation, are you allowed to give like a ballpark of what you got, and like did you have to negotiate at all for it?
Yeah, so I will say that I didn't negotiate just because like I was just willing to take on anything at this point because I didn't mention, but I kind of just left my job preemptively without like anything backed up. I
Yeah,
mean,
I do
my
that.
yeah, yeah. So I kind of, but I did this WGDU full time. I knocked on my A plus, my network plus. I did your course careers.
Okay. Well, you busy.
I'm
You do
trying
a
to
lot.
get, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to knock out my security plus before my start date. And then I just was like, okay, like I'll just take whatever they give me. And it's nice to know, like, what you outlined in the course careers, it's like, hey, it's like the easiest money you can make, if you just ask, right? Because I mean, the worst thing they could say is no, right? I just didn't bother.
Mhm.
As far as what I got, I'll give what the job description range was. So it at the company or in the job description, it gave at the lowest end 40,000 and then 60,000 at the higher end based on like your experience, like in your locality as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's not bad. And then you can start getting experience like kind of soon. And then if you want to, you can negotiate next time or something.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just excited to get experience finally. And then,
Yeah.
plus two, is being in school at WGU, it's like, okay, I could probably just, do this tech support thing for a little bit. And then once I finish school, then I'll kind of go into like, okay, what can I explore after this?
Gotcha. That's really good. Actually, that's what I tend to recommend on my channel because there's no real in my opinion anyway, there's no real reason to like wait until you finish the whole degree and then be like, okay, now I can like get a job. In your case, you got one already and you can just kind of coast at your job and then like, learn what you want to learn and finish your degree. And then you have like, all this experience ready to go and a degree. And then you can like, go to the next level or something instead of waiting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Especially like at a company where I'm at now, like there's a lot of opportunity for growth, and there's a lot of things I could potentially get into. So, cool with just doing the tech support thing until like at least finish school. Cause I do actually plan on getting my master's and then like a couple other certifications as well.
Nice.
So we'll see.
You're doing a lot. That's very impressive. So good work.
And thank you. I appreciate it.
And then how long did it take you from the time you graduated CourseCareers to actually like get your offer letter, I guess?
So I got CourseCareers, the certificate, I think like the first of the year. And then at the end of the month, I got my A plus, and then I applied to this job. And then so the interview process was about like a month. So I would say about like 2 months.
Gotcha.
But I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I wasn't like heavily applying to places because kind of like in a, I guess like weird spot because yeah, we live here in the Bay Area, but we're actually planning to move.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, it's just way too expensive out. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's why I was just kind of like, okay, like I'll just kind of like lackadaisically apply. I was mainly looking for remote jobs. And then also too, like I kind of had like some educational goals in mind first. So I was like, okay, let me knock out some of these certifications first. I was, hoping to get the trifecta first before I start looking. And then, so yeah. And then, luckily with this one, I applied and, definitely course careers helped because the one thing I'll say is that I network with people in course careers and then also on LinkedIn. And then that aspect, like networking part, helped me get the job.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
And is your job remote? I heard you say you were applying to remote jobs.
yeah. So the job is remote.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. After working like out in the field for X amount of years, and now it's going to be nice.
Yeah,
I've been
that's
like researching how to get like home office set up and stuff like that. I've been looking at desks and stuff. So,
nice. Oh, it's good to hear. That's
yeah.
like all autonomy is like here already then.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you start working already? Or are you like kind of waiting still and training?
Yeah, so I actually start on the 3rd of next month, because of the, like I said, with the move and stuff like that. I asked them to push it out for us or for me. So they were cool with that. Yeah, so I just kind of doing some onboarding things here and there. And then, yeah, waiting to get my laptop and all that.
Nice. That's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Super excited.
Do you know like what you're going to be working with yet? Like any specific technology or like what you're going to be doing? Or is it kind of like mystery still?
No, yeah. So I'll just say this. So the company I work for is Axon. They actually make body cameras and tasers. So I will be like a tech support rep. And then so, kind of just helping troubleshoot with like, the hardware and stuff like that. So kind of funny enough, like this kind of aligns with like my previous experience. I think that's what kind of really also helped me get the job was being an end user of their product.
Oh.
And then kind of just speaking, and then kind of speaking to like, okay, because in the interview process, I was like, yeah, I was the end user. I did have problems. And then that helped me too, because like I said, one of the troubleshooting questions I did get asked, I was like, okay, yeah, well, as the end user, this is what I did. I disconnected the camera from the phone, paired back up and stuff like that. So that definitely helped as well, having that experience using their product.
That's cool. I bet they're happy to get you. Like, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. And he was like the user of our, well, at least similar products of our stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I mean, I definitely, like I said, I've been using their stuff for probably over 5 years and then super familiar with it. But, when I was going through the process, I didn't even realize how much more they actually have, like a lot of software and a lot of stuff like that. So pretty crazy. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, it's exciting. In terms of like the CourseCareers course and then your experience going through like the job hunting process and interviewing, like all of that, if anyone's watching this and like thinking about going through course careers, is there like any particular part of the course that you would tell them like, oh, pay special attention to this that might have helped you?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say the whole course in general is great just because I think the main thing that really like drew me towards course careers was because like when I was studying for like A plus, I was like, okay, I'm learning all this stuff, but like I'm not actually applying the knowledge to something, like actually building hands-on experience. Like as you know, like with WGU, they give you like the cert master stuff. And so I kind of did the labs, but then I was like, man, like once I go through the labs, like what's next? You know what I mean? I mean, I could do them over and over again. That's right, but like once I'm done with the course, then what,
Yeah.
So, and then what I liked about course careers was like it focused a lot on like really main stuff that you would potentially be doing as like an IT support professional, right? So like, the Active Directory, the ticketing system, which is I noticed is like, not just in help desk, it's going to be in cybersecurity or even cloud support. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
tickets are going to be a big part of your IT career, even like network engineering, right? You'll get a support ticket to fix like something going on with the network, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think one thing that I think really helped me was definitely like the interview section and then the labs. Like I said, like earlier, it's like getting really hands on with something. It's like you're applying the knowledge that you're learning versus just like, okay, I have this stuff in my head, like all this knowledge. Like, how do I portray that I actually know it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like exactly, yeah. So like that was nice, like being able to go through like the course careers and like doing like Active Directory, like setting up users, resetting the password, and then yeah, like I said, the interview questions really helped as well because you gave a really like a good amount of interview questions to expect. Because like I mean, I basically got all those types of questions in like my interview process.
Really?
So
That's cool.
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah, that's good to hear. That's as someone who's gone through like so many industry certs, like I have like 5 CompTIA and like a bunch of other crazy things. I kind of
Mhm.
noticed that trend where like I'm getting all this like theory, but I have to go out and make the practical thing myself. So I was like, I should just make this course based on like all the practical stuff that you do as an entry level help desk person. So it's funny that you kind of like notice that when you do A plus, you're like, oh, okay, I have all this knowledge now, but like it doesn't feel that substantial because you haven't really done anything yet. That's what I didn't like about doing certs, so I tried to like put that in the course. So
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I kind of learned through, not just in course careers, but you kind of mentioned it on your YouTube videos and stuff like
oh
that. It's like you have all this knowledge like on a certification, but it's just like, okay, like can you apply it to the job? Because like you said in numerous of your videos, it's like, okay, like you can have the degrees and the certs, right? But do you have the practical knowledge or do you have the experience, right? So I think
yeah.
that's one thing that really helped in my interview process was the projects really gave me something to talk about.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then like, yeah, exactly. And then I think it also helps too for people who don't have experience like myself. Like it kind of shows the employer like you have initiative to create the experience for yourself versus trying to like gain it through a job, right?
Yes, that's very good, and that's very true. And as someone who hires other people, if I see people, or as someone who has hired persons, I don't know what I'm saying, but if I see
Mm-hmm.
like the applicant doing something like that, it's super impressive to me, and I will be super willing to take them on because I feel like everyone has like the physiological capability of doing most things, but not everybody is going to go out of their way and then do something on their own for the sake of getting experience. So that's
Now that you mention it, it's funny because one of the videos that you mentioned in the past, or you had in the past, was that the astronaut theory, right? So
yeah,
that
yeah, I
really
watched that.
resonated because when you released that, it really resonated with me. Like, because at the time I was still working as a cop, and then I was like, because I was in this limbo where like, is this possible? Like, am I smart enough for this, or like. And then, and then so I kind of had to just pick myself up out of that and say, like, okay, I'm capable of doing this because I have all the means. I have a computer, I have a brain, I have a body,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's just all about, really applying yourself. And yeah, I think the one thing that a lot of people are guilty of, I'm guilty of it. I'm sure you are too. It's like I tend to compare my path to like other people and stuff like that. And then
yeah.
not necessarily jealousy, but like it's just more so like, man, why am I not like catching on as fast as they are, But then I have to just tell myself, like, okay, I'm learning at my own pace. My path's my path. So it doesn't matter what other people are doing. I mean, it took me a while to pick up Python, but then now it's like, okay, like I could at least read it and like code some stuff up, but then, definitely no master, so.
Yeah, I think that's important to recognize. And then people have different, styles of stuff. So, for instance, someone's learning pattern might be like just linear forever. And other people,
Mhm.
like, they just like don't know what's going on until they have like enough stuff where they have like a comprehensive view. And then they just like accelerate like super a lot because they have enough information. So, it's just important to
Yeah.
like, stick with it. And I feel like the progress you're making is like really crazy crazy. It's more than I would expect someone to do, going through this, like all the certs and like WGU and like all this stuff. So yeah, that's impressive. So good work on that.
I appreciate it. Yeah. And what's funny is like what helped me too was your study method, one of the videos that you created like a couple years ago. And it just made sense for me. It's like, okay, like, because when I was trying to go through like the A plus material, I'm like kind of watching through, I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like I was taking notes and stuff like, but then when I came across your videos, like, oh, that made sense. Like, okay, just watch the video. All right, try to get like that high level understanding of what it is. Don't try to like, hey, like what grade, you know what I mean? Like stuck on that, you know?
Yeah.
Or like, for example, like, man, Network Plus, that really kicked me in the butt. Like that was pretty hard cert. And then what I did was like, yeah, like you said, just try to get that high level overview. And then I used like Anki, right? So I, made like flashcards for each, close to like 800, 900 flashcards for each cert. And especially for like A plus, so technically that's over like 1,500 cards because I made like 800 for each test, right? So
Yeah.
I drilled those. The one thing I did add was like, I think I'm like a 50-50 learner on like hands-on, like visual as well as like reading.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I do the videos, then I'll read a study guide, then I'll do like the Anki flashcard. So that's definitely been helpful for me.
Apparently it worked out pretty well. Getting those certs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's working so far. So that's why whenever I tell people when they ask me, like, oh, what's your study method? It's like, oh, hey, here, look at Josh's video.
Oh,
I'm doing exactly the same thing. Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's like adding my own thing, right? I read study guides and stuff like that. Or I like study guides because like I don't like, I mean, as you probably know, like certification books are like 1,000 pages long. Like I picked up a CCNA book, it was like this thick. I was like, how am I supposed to get through this? So I like study guides because it's kind of just like a brief overview of everything. It doesn't dive too deep into like certain topics and stuff like that. I mean, as you know, it doesn't really deep dive into it, right? It's just kind of like surface level overview of everything.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, this is like not necessarily related to CourseCareers, so you don't have to like say CourseCareers or anything, of course. But for the people watching who like want to get into IT, who are maybe they're like a nurse or a police officer or some other, profession, do you have any advice you would give to them as someone who's just made that transition successfully?
Definitely it's doable, especially like a person like me. I'm 30 and I had to come to a realization like, okay, I'm not that old. I'm still young enough to make that transition to better my life. And so, or like not necessarily better my life, but just work towards something that's more sustainable, right? That was my situation. It was like something more sustainable for my future and my future family, right? So yeah, I think it's the one thing I would definitely say it's attainable, but then just I know a lot of people in these professions, like, they have to rely on it for like the paycheck, support their family and stuff. So the one thing I'll say is like, just work within your means, like for example, with WGU, I tried to like balance both, but I think I came to a point where it's like, I'm being pulled away from it too much. That's why I was kind of like, I'll just let it go. You know what I mean? So my situation is different from everyone else's. Like, I have like a really supportive wife and, supportive family and friends. And so I think kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, it's like the astronaut theory, right? Like everyone's physically and mentally capable of doing something. It's just like you have to put in the effort, establish the discipline, and just keep working hard at it. And then eventually it'll get you where you want to be, right?
Yeah, very well said. I like to think about like we're not all trying to become like Taylor Swift, right? We're just trying to work in IT. It's definitely achievable. Like you said, put in the discipline and do the steps. It's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, look at all the people that you've kind of interviewed. Like, everyone kind of had that like transition, not necessarily like my path, right? Like police officer, but like, just people who came out of like carpentry or like did behavioral health, or like I know one guy was, who I'm actually pretty cool with, Alex. He was in the fitness industry for his whole life, and stuff like that. So I think it's just the first step is like making that decision, right? It's like, okay, I need to do something else, right? I think the next step that most people need to just kind of like consistently tell themselves like it is achievable.
Yeah. Absolutely. Very well said. And thank you for that. I forgot to ask you about your socials. Do you have any like a LinkedIn or anything that you want to share?
Yeah, so I have my LinkedIn. I think I'm connected with you. And then I do have, my GitHub, and then trying to put more repositories in there. And then I do have my Instagram as well.
Gotcha. I can like get those from you afterwards, and I'll put it like on the screen or something.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for the interview. I'm sure it's going to help a bunch of people as usual. You shared a lot of good things, so thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you taking the time of your day and meeting with me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we will see you in Discord.